morning. How is everybody? I think there is a 5 second delay, and at some point, I'm going to figure out how to make it so there's very little delay. But I feel like unless I upgrade a button in YouTube Studio, that might cause either more of a higher bit rate on my end. I don't know if I'm able to do it, but there's just a little bit of a delay. So I'll try to keep up with chat, but if we're talking about stuff and you're replying, there might be just a very minor delay. All right. A little bit later start this morning. Good morning, everybody. If it's morning, if it's not morning, then good afternoon, all that stuff. This morning is better than yesterday. Yesterday, I my car, I don't know what happened to it, but I had to get it towed because it would not start. So we're not dealing with that this morning. This morning we're riding. We're talking about riding. We're doing all the good things. 4:45 a.m. Nice, nice. Oh yeah, all across the country, different times. Perfect. Let's see. There were a couple of questions that were coming in before we hopped on. Um, but let's see. Yeah, so just so everybody knows, if you type at and then my username, I'll get a it'll highlight that. So I'll know if you're asking me a question or if you guys are asking questions kind of to each other. There's also a few things I want to try to do with at least the stream. I'm still working on OBS, trying to get some settings figured out on either trying to get music beforehand, or I'm going to try to change our overlays and stuff. So that way it's a little bit more branded, not as stock looking. So definitely looking into some of those things. Also, too, I know a couple of people have sent me sample pages and stuff like that. I've been really behind on some other kind of like client work and just work stuff in general. So I'll try to get to that stuff eventually. It's not just gonna sit there and collect dust. I'll get to it eventually, and I'll try to get all you guys a little bit of feedback and stuff like that. While we are getting ready for, I guess, our first um, writing session, we don't have a whole lot on the agenda today, so we'll kind of take it as kind of questions and topics come up as you're working on stuff. But let me know, I guess, what things you guys are going to work on. I had to turn my volume up to 26%. You may have loud volumes elsewhere. The thing is, I'm looking at it on my end, and I'm hitting the correct zone. So I'll check on that too. There's a lot of little functions and stuff that I'm no by no means am I an expert in OBS and stuff. So I'll check it out afterwards and see if there's something. It might be just my mic in general, or where my face is. Could be the gain or something like that. But I don't want to blow up everybody else's speakers and everything. But let's have this. Why doesn't everybody kind of either share what you're going to work on this morning, and then we'll kind of get right into the first sort of writing session. Kind of get right into it. We're a little bit later start, but we'll probably go a little bit longer this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up our timer. And let's see, that will go here. And I'll go ahead and mute myself and we'll get a little bit of writing done. Branded merchandise is coming soon. No, honestly, I have not yet talked about that yet, so we'll see. All right, welcome back. How was that? Right now, it's interesting. I've been kind of stuck on these few chapters for this project I'm working on. Um, but they through these couple of different revisions, definitely trying to seeing a much more polished and much more clear vision. Yeah, everyone was on silent pretty much. um, Looks like a lot of early drafts people were working on, um, which I think is good. I mean, this my own project, the one that I'm working on right now. This is I would say this is like a somewhere between a first draft and a second draft. The first pass I did at this one was most definitely a zero draft. Um, but I tried to do it in tandem sort of with the outline that I was making. Someone did ask about hoodies and t-shirts. That is something that I have no background in making, but it would be kind of cool to make stuff like that. So maybe in the future. Um, Rushing with words. What do you think makes a great writer? Um, a seemingly easy question to ask becomes very hard to answer. Um, I don't think there's any one thing that would make a good writer, but to give the like cheap, simple answer, would be someone who can, um, especially if we're talking about like fiction, someone that can effectively tell a story. But I think more so what you're asking is what makes good writing or what makes someone be good at writing. Um, and a lot of the times I like to say I like to think of it as if you feel like you can look back, whether it was a year or 2 years or even like a month ago, and compare that to where you are now and see some level of improvement or some better level of understanding, that makes for a great writer. There's a lot of, especially with writing, I think that there's much more of this war or a battle you're fighting with yourself, that's one of like attrition. And a lot of the times the like great equalizer, the great culling of people who want to write and then people who are writers or people who want to publish stuff, people who don't publish stuff, is usually this like self war of attrition, being that usually it's the people that keep doing it and continue to do it and continue to learn or hone whatever their craft is, that usually that is what sets people apart, right? It's the people that kind of stick with it the longest and that continue to keep doing it, as opposed to anyone with some untapped skill or talent and stuff. Because the greatest writers might not necessarily stick with it long enough to finish a project or something like that. So a great writer is a number of different things. Sometimes it's the person that does it for the longest and sticks it out. Other times it's the person that um, has a very unique voice or unique prose. It can be anything, um, and then it becomes even more complicated and um, confusing to define that if we then look at different genres and stuff, because there's a great writer in the romance or historical fiction or thriller genre the same as a great writer in science fiction or fantasy. So let's see. Drafting, some more drafting. First chapter for fantasy. That's cool. Switch from Times New Roman to Cambria spreads things out. I am a would it be like classical? I prefer Times New Roman to everything. 12-point Times New Roman. That's like I think that's the only thing I like typing in. Even if I'm working on other people's stuff, I always ask them if I can change it to Times New Roman. Let's see. Hello, question. Would you send a first draft to a developmental editor, or would you wait to draft? That is a really good question. So, and this depends on. It'll probably depend on the developmental editor, one, and it will depend on how clean your first draft is. If your first draft is a mess and you haven't really spoken to your developmental editor yet, then it'll probably be a lot of work. And I will say there's a lot of things that you can catch on your own and adjust on your own after even a very light second draft or a light self edit. You don't have to go through and do a line edit. I would actually advise against doing a line edit or doing an edit for perfect grammar or sentence structure and stuff like that. I would try to do a comprehensive self-developmental edit and then try to seek out an editor. Now, there's some nuances though. So if you're doing like a writing coaching / developmental editor type thing, that can be really beneficial because sometimes they can help you craft and develop certain chapters or scenes, or help you step by step with like the flow of stuff. But honestly, I don't think there's a lot of editors out there that do that. There's that definitely isn't the standard by which people kind of operate, or editors kind of operate. I know I kind of do that, and I actually prefer doing it that way because I like interacting and talking and going through certain scenes and stuff. But yeah, I would, if you're going and you're just finding a random developmental editor, one, it'll be a lot of work and there's probably a lot of stuff that you can cut yourself, and two, it can be really expensive. So judge that, and you can always send two sample. Most editors will take a sample edit and whatnot to see. Sometimes you'll have a lot of errors that they'll say, listen, don't hire me because fix some of this stuff yourself, because otherwise it'll run you up a massive bill. Other times they'll say, sure, and you'll like kind of the edits that they have, especially if you have maybe a clean first draft. I did all right the sprint, basically just a paragraph written, getting into my favorite things, an environmental description. Cool. Yeah, it's funny. Certain, like, I always, whenever we do these things, I always default back to like reading or spending this for the first session. Oh, here, actually, let me get rid of this stuff. I always spend kind of that first session getting caught up on the things that I wrote maybe a day or two ago, or whenever I last wrote. So I would not send fiction to developmental editor until I am sure I can improve draft myself. Yeah, that's a good principle as well to go by. As for the question of good writer, I agree there's a lot to being a good writer, but I do look for two things in a writer. One, having something to say, two, telling it in an interesting way. Yeah, that's also a good point too. I mean, that goes into the realm of like, how original is your idea, and how much can you take? Because I think it's actually it's taking a used. I guess this is just where my mind went right away, because like if you take a used trope or a used sort of kind of storytelling element, and then it's usually it takes a more skilled like writer or storyteller to then make that feel like a fresh story. or a fresh, an interesting story. So I would agree with those 2 points. I think there's also a lot of other things that go into it. Um, let's see. How can you improve your self confidence as a writer? I feel so selfish and egotistical talking about my own writing, even to people who are legitimately interested. This is another thing where it's just if you do it enough, you kind of become desensitized to it. Because I had actually a friend who told me this. He wasn't a writer, but he's an artist. He paints. But he this was a couple of years ago, and I did the same thing. I would like always tiptoe around talking about writing or talking about my own writing or being a writer. And he was like, he basically said, if you're not going to call yourself that, nobody else is going to. And until you start calling yourself that or acting like that or embodying this thing that you're interested in, because nobody else is going to. For him, he was like, nobody was going to call me a painter or an artist until I kind of called myself that. And so that's one of the first things. And the second thing is just the confidence element is just just doing it and practice doing it. And there's also because the there's a part of it too where you start to become and this was something that was I took this from because I had wrestled in college and stuff, and writing I associate a lot of things about combat sports and stuff like that for writing, because in reality writing is a very solo endeavor, right? It's just you in the keyboard or you in the page. And what I think is interesting is that very often it feels solo, but there is a collaborative element. Combat sports, whether it's wrestling, MMA, jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, they're very similar because it's going to be you competing. It's just you, right? Everybody's watching you. It's a very solo thing, but you have training partners. You have people around you that you work with. The same thing goes for writing. Although you're the only person actually writing and everything, but there's a very collaborative element because you have spaces like this. You have writing groups. You have readers. There's a inherently collaborative element to writing, and the way that kind of ties into the confidence as a writer is that in the realm of athletics, it was always that you thought of yourself either as a fan or a competitor. And if you were the fan, you're always thinking about how rankings, or you're thinking about people that are better than you or stuff like that. But once you start thinking of yourself as a competitor, or in this case as a writer, that you shed a lot of those preconceived kind of thought processes, and those things that you almost like handicap yourself because you're like, oh, I'm not really a writer, or I'm not really that good, and so I shouldn't be talking about this. But in reality, like, this is what you are doing, and this is what you enjoy, and this is how you identify yourself. And the more practice you get embodying that, I think, and this is what helped me, is the more confidence you get in your own writing, especially around people that are other writers, because every writer started out in the same place, right? Every writer started out with a blank page. Every writer has started out either in a classroom or whatever it is. So knowing that they all understand this position and this feeling that you might have at this point, and that should be kind of like a freeing feeling that you can shed a lot of those a lot of those burdens. So is there a searchable index of story ideas where I can see what others have done to to know if my idea is new. Listen, your idea is probably been done before in a different way, or elements of your idea has been done. Um, don't don't worry about doing something new and not repeating something, because the thing that makes your story unique, even though it might be a repeat or it might have been done before, is your own voice. It's going to be your interpretation of the story. It's going to be all of these different elements of fiction that influence and impact your story that you put in the way that you put it in. You can go, though. I love going to tvtropes.com. That is like the most extensive database of every trope. I think every piece of fiction, nearly every piece of fiction, cataloged and assigned different tropes or different storytelling elements to it. I use that a lot, especially for just learning about either a trope or something like that. So it's a good starting place, but it's called tvtropes.com. Let's see. Get lost in self-doubt, keep rewriting the same thing. I've watched too many, never do this, always do this videos. Yeah, and you know what's funny is I'm working on another video right now that is kind of, because there's a lot of never do this, and if you kind of know the, I guess we'll call it edutainment, right? The educational entertainment sphere of YouTube. There's the system that is this platform. It rewards different like emotional triggers and stuff. And that's kind of just part of the game that gets played. Now, that's not to say that the information isn't useful, but the never do this, always do this, you're making these kinds of mistakes, or you're always making this kind of mistakes. Those are usually used not necessarily as clickbait, because clickbait would just be misleading. And actually too, clickbait would very much show up on the algorithm. YouTube's algorithm is so good that if something is clickbaity, that it will immediately, you can tell, and it will be deprioritized just by the way that the audience interacts with whatever it is that gets clicked on. But a lot of the times it's more so about going through and not necessarily taking everything that they have at face value, because with writing there is so much of a flexibility in whatever rule or advice or principle that says you should follow, or that is encouraged to follow. There are always exceptions to stuff being broken. Something like, very simply, like point of view, right? You should never be switching between point of view and head hopping and stuff like that. But third person omniscient is basically that. Now, there's like the idea, though, is that if you understand or you know some of these rules, and then you intentionally break them or immerse or subvert them, then it works. So the thing about having your confidence kind of get broken and doubt and keep rewriting stuff, the biggest thing I would say is you just have to keep pushing forward. Probably one of the most important things that helped me when I was early into my writing career was practicing finishing projects. So practicing finishing projects. That is something that has, because if you think about it, you can sit and toil on the same scene or the same chapter or the same line of dialogue endlessly, but it's not going to matter if you never finish whatever that is. And so pushing yourself to finish something, and then going back and revising, and then keep pushing through and finish again another round of revisions, and then go back to that troublesome scene or whatever. But the practice and the experience that you gain from actually finishing a story is way more valuable than trying to polish one stone in like your gravel driveway. And so because as you start to practice finishing projects, there's all of these different phases that you then are experiencing, right? If you are writing like a short story, practicing, in a very very clipped sense, finishing a short story, you're seeing the whole arc of finishing a project. So you're practicing a setup, a payoff. You're practicing a keeping things tight and concise. You're practicing revisions then, because when you go back and revise, and then you're also, if it does get finished, you're then practicing trying to sell it or trying to get it published. So there's all of these different steps that outside of just writing a good scene that you need to kind of work on. And so the edutainment is good and it's helpful, and there's some really great advice out there. But there becomes a point where you need to just put it aside, write, make mistakes, and then go back and fix it during revisions. All right, I feel bad because I've been talking for a long time. I'll try. Let's see. On never always do this videos. I personally think it's actually pretty bad for you if you actually want to learn how to write slash be an artist. Rigid thinking is the enemy of creative. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that like there's all these exceptions. You can probably find a number of writers or even artists that break certain rules. Maybe I need to seriously. I wouldn't say that you need to seriously reconsider it. Going to writing circles will be really helpful because one, you're getting personalized critique, usually for free. Two, you're seeing other people's stories and you're seeing other people's writing styles and you're analyzing those. So it's forcing you to read and interact with stories. And in three, I think it's good to build a network. Truthfully, it's good to build a network of people that will give you honest critique and feedback. So I wouldn't say don't go to them, but what I would say is that you can take an older chapter, an older scene. You don't have to wait for them to give you feedback to continue on. Go to them, see what advice they give, see what feedback they give, and then keep that. But if you're not writing that scene that you submitted or that you're working on with them, come back to it later. Just save the notes. If there's something really pressing, yeah, jump back in it, but keep moving on with your story. Okay. I'm gonna clip myself there. I'm going to pause on the responding to comments. We're mostly caught up. Let's do another writing session. Also because I think there's an ambulance coming pretty soon here, so that will be unenjoyable to listen to. Let's also we'll come back, we'll talk some more, but let's first do another 20-minute writing session. You can keep throwing stuff down in the chat. I might hop over and answer some stuff there, but otherwise I'll come back to it. So let's throw up our timer and I will go ahead and mute myself. Okay. Very quiet chat. Everybody seemed to be very productive. I'm curious. How many words did everybody write? Or I guess how much if you weren't necessarily writing any new words, any revisions or any particular um scenes or chapters, what was everybody working on? I've actually, let's see how many words I've got on this document now. I think I'm pretty much at 50,000, which is yeah, about 50,000 words on this project. My goal for this book is to get I'd like to get it to at least 80. Just a typical novel length. Still trying to get the character to a meeting part. The conversation hasn't started. I think we need more than 20 minutes to get warmed up. Yeah, I that's the thing I've wondered about. I feel like maybe doing 25 minutes is a little bit better. Um but if we do any longer than that, then it kind of becomes a little bit less of a sprint, or I guess a little session. Um but I don't know, we might change that in the future. Just reorganize notes. Now I have to come up with new ideas. Yeah. I've done that before too, where I've just kind of spent time organizing my thoughts, rereading what I had before, getting kind of caught up on the scene that I'm working on and stuff. Perfect. Yeah, that's good too. It's very inspiring to be here. That's why I'm here. Anyways, I'll write more after this is over. Yeah, I usually do the same thing. I usually try to like stand up, walk around for a minute, then come back. I think it's also sometimes helpful just to be talking about stories or even bouncing ideas as well. That's kind of what I hope this is a little bit. Something that I do want to do eventually is I like when I schedule these, the chat stays there and people can kind of talk to each other, but I'd like to try to make something that can be a bit more offline for people. So even if we're not in a live stream, because I know last week there was a lot of really good back and forth, not necessarily between me or anybody, but just between kind of the people discussing stuff in chat. So I don't know. I've made discords before for other stuff. I might set that up in the future, but it's sometimes be a lot of work to sort of manage. But we'll see. I do want to try to create some kind of way that we can all talk about stuff, talk about writing and whatnot, um, offline or even outside of these as well. But we'll that's something that I'm also kind of thinking about. It just becomes though another thing to kind of either find moderation for, moderate myself, set up myself, find somebody to set it up. So um revising a chapter in a different document, trying to de-romanticize the samurai culture in favor of more realism and see how it looks, while the publisher has my more romanticized copy. I think last week, didn't you ask about sending revisions and stuff to a publisher and everything? The Sam Writers Club on Twitter was helpful sometimes. Just knowing other people writing, it's like going to the cafe. Yeah, that's true too. We could do like a group. We could make our own Twitter group or X group. There's definitely I've seen those growing. Um, I'll look into that too. That's a good thing to bring up as well. Sarah said yes. Oh, about last week. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I that was a good question though that you had brought up last week. I know there's a lot of discussion kind of on that, going back and forth. Probably don't need to revisit it again here, but interesting. Being for a group, yeah. I just I there's I know that there's a lot of different groups, so it becomes more of a, how do you build kind of a community that's useful to people. I see a lot of people on YouTube or whatever creating discords and stuff, and I just want, part of me is trying to make it so it creates some kind of value for people. I also see people put it behind put like discords and stuff behind paywalls. I probably wouldn't do that. I've seen people do that as well, but for me, it would be whatever we decided to kind of go with would be strictly for community building and kind of for collaboration, um, for people that are kind of within this community. Uh, Not used to X, but YouTube complains if I watch too much. That can be the case too sometimes. But I think that I wouldn't necessarily make or post videos on X necessarily. It would be more of a kind of like a living chat room or a living place where people can kind of come and go. But the reason why that the groups on X, that could be good. I'd have to look into it. It's basically just like a live feed, whereas a Discord, we can make certain channels. So something that, I don't know if people ever have problems finding beta readers or even critique partners. Something that we could do is set up certain channels for finding people to swap their work or give critique, and even almost like a writers club or something like that, or a writing group. We could also make something like a, what are you reading channel or something like that, and then if we get a lot of people from different sort of genres, we can create then specific channels for those genres. So it's something to consider. I have trouble finding beta readers. Yeah, it can be hard because I think finding, it's funny, beta readers are super super important, but most beta readers are writers, and they're more interested sometimes in finding somebody to beta read their own stuff. So it can be hard. And I think also too, it's so writing in these kind of like writing and publishing groups, and even just the industry in general is so decentralized. There's like, there's no one place to go and find these sorts of things or talk to people like this. You might find little pockets in communities like on YouTube and stuff like that, but that isn't even really a guarantee that there's going to be a community there waiting for you to come and interact with. Yeah, much better to swap with people you have some interactions with before, so you can see if it's a good match. Yeah, and that's kind of the idea behind it. It would be to create a group where people kind of know each other. I personally do my writer's circle stuff in writing centric Discord servers. Yeah, so that's basically what we would try to make, would be a specifically for I guess this group and stuff like that, or for like this channel, this brand. I'll look into it. I've made Discord servers before, but I usually made them on pretty pretty light in terms of moderation. So I would like to do this right. So I'd have to look into it a little bit, but maybe by the next time we'll have that. Because I like having there being a space where people can keep talking to each other and not having to go and try to find it, but like being able to um, provide that. All right. Um, let's do this. We talked a lot before the last sprint or last session, so um why don't we do it again? Um, yeah, I hear you on that. Definitely something you'd want to look into before driving to, but could be good stepping stone. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too is that it's there's again I see a lot of not that I see a lot of discords being used, but I think that ours would it would be I would want it to be like an asset rather than just some kind of like database or something. I want there to be some kind of incentive for people to interact and stuff. And yeah, maybe that's having critique swaps or even I don't know. It might be more work, but even doing more like even like book clubs or stuff like that. But then you also want to run you don't want to run into people just spamming self promotion and stuff like that. So um there'll be a balance. But yeah, that's by the way, rest with words. I missed on X. Questions are always so good. I invited someone to this live session. He was asking where you went. Yeah, I the problem is that even though they're pretty simple questions, just the amount of time and being spread amongst all of these different platforms and trying to find the spaces where I felt like I was having the most value and not just having the most value, but also then enjoying the most. YouTube definitely became a priority. Um, I'll probably come back. I'm not like gone from Twitter or X. Um, it's probably something that I should keep doing, but the there's like this cost benefit for at least just for my time and the value of providing some of that stuff on X. Um, I think that there was a lot of really good value and there's a lot of good community building there. But I wanted to merge sort of the two different communities of like X or Twitter and then YouTube because those are like if I could do two things, it would be kind of having those two things kind of like really complementary to each other. But just the way that it is and the the conversion of people interacting with both of those platforms it was like it was as if I was there was some trail over right there's like some people coming from one to the other and I know you came from over there but the conversion of people either going from YouTube to then Twitter or X and interacting there and then the community that was on Twitter and X going and interacting with YouTube there was like this great schism and there was very little crossover so it felt like I was like managing two different kind of brands of like what I was doing. And it just in keeping up with all of the questions and then trying to interact and trying to be valuable and respond, especially on Twitter, because some of them got a lot of engagement, which was great. But then I felt like I wasn't. I was asking these and people were replying, but I wasn't able to get back to everybody or even get back to anybody. And then if I missed it for like a day, I would have like hundreds of comments, and I would be like, I'll get to that eventually. And then like you miss it for 2 days or a weekend or something, and you also you've got hundreds of these, and so it just became a lot to sort of manage, but I want to try to find or strike a balance between them. Looks like that kind of sparked a few more things. Let's see. Oh, would agree. Your videos are amazing. Much preferred over your questions, but wanted you to know. Yeah, and but that's the thing, is that I did really like doing it. I like the community building over there. Um, we'll try to find a balance. We'll try to find a balance. Um, I agree. Having additional things rather than just a database is a good idea. Writing specific voice channels, general voice channels, book clubs, which you mentioned, are all potential ideas. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, is that I'd want to. You want to do it all, but I want to make sure that in doing all of those things, that we are like that it's beneficial, and they're not just, a new person coming in seeing all of these different channels. Is that going to be like sensory overload? Is that going to be too much? And so it's trying to figure out how to kind of tailor that experience that I think we might want to think about, and will probably be points of discussion even here, because I think that this is, as much as it's a brainstorming and kind of talking about writing, it's also a little bit about, there's some like meta conversations about this channel, and like this community that everyone here is kind of a part of, because that's what it is. We're all part of that. Discord writer channels that I'm part of tend to become gossip channels and seldom use fresh one. And that's the thing too, is that, yeah, I don't want it like, or I don't want it to become just like a meme fest where like it's only those kinds of things. But it's like, how do you avoid that, and what kind of moderation do you do? And if people are going there and they're interacting, and that's kind of where the culture is going, or that's where like the culture is kind of morphing or changing into, does it make sense to try to kill it or do like a cleansing or something? I don't know, and I guess it will depend on the general feel, but I want it to be more of a value add to people, rather than kind of like you said, a big gossip fest. Or I always just think of it as becoming just like filled with memes and people, like almost like a second like Twitter page or something. Oh yeah, I only had one tweet get super engaged, and I quit Twitter for a week. So overwhelmed. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that sometimes you just like, if you just ignore it and keep going, that's one way to kind of handle it. Um, but it's like, this is, all of these are kind of part of like my business and my brand, and so I feel this like I need to engage and keep providing value. And so if people are interacting with me, I feel like I should, like, they're interacting with me for a reason. And so, or there's like, they're giving me something by interacting and interacting with others, that I feel like I need to then keep interacting with them, or keep that never ending circle going. And then if it starts becoming like overwhelming or too much, then you're like, okay, I can't have this going on as well. So I totally get that. Yeah, I could start with a prompt too. That could be something as well. I started doing a little bit more on the community tab, doing questions or polls and stuff. And they've actually been getting pretty good engagement. I didn't know how many people actually used the community functions, or those like polling functions on Twitter. Uh, I think it's not necessarily a new feature for YouTube, but I think it's one that they are pushing or using a little bit more. So I'll sometimes ask stuff on there. Sometimes it will be related to like the channel. Other times it will be writing related. But I'm trying to limit those to a couple here and there, because I don't want those to flood people's kind of feeds and stuff. Is there anything that helps you on days where your mind isn't feeling conductive to writing? Busted out 3 samples in 2 weeks, but oh yeah. So that happens sometimes where you get these like bouts of jet fuel. Usually if a scene or if something is being particularly tricky to write or hard to write, or if you are not feeling motivated to write a certain thing, sometimes a symptom can be that you've written yourself kind of into a corner, right? You might have had an idea for this one thing happening, and once you write that, you get to a certain point where then you don't know what is going to come next. So usually what I like to do if I'm really not feeling like writing is I will skip to a different part in the story and try and outline or brainstorm something that is farther into the story. And so that way you can start to kind of, as you, let's say we're doing, plan here, why don't we do this? We haven't used our paint tool thing. Hang on one second. We haven't used this today. All right. Right there. Turn off our filter as well. We'll talk about this, and then we'll do another writing session in a second. But this is a really good point, because I think that this is something that it's something that kind of happens to all of us, right? So if we're kind of working on here, we write, and we get to here, the story keeps going, but we kind of get stuck. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll jump ahead, not just like to this scene, right? Or maybe not even this scene. I'll try to jump ahead pretty far and then just start to like brainstorm plot points or things that I want to happen, or maybe even write some of this. Because a lot of times what will end up happening is, if you think about all the things that kind of go into a scene that goes, like a later scene, or as we start to get closer to the end, what we need to do, what we usually are doing here, is there's usually a ton of foreshadowing that happens, right? There's usually a ton of setup that happens here, or it can be here or here or here or here. And there's also like something's going to have changed between here and here. There's got to be something that's changed. We aren't going to be the same. There's like some delta that's going to happen to our characters. Maybe a character gets killed off. Maybe a character leaves. Maybe a new character is introduced. But there's something that's going to happen here that's going to create some kind of change here. And again, this doesn't have to be like this point. This can be like here. And now you're thinking kind of about the delta in here, right? Like what is the change? That looks like a face. What is the change that's happening from this point to this point? Usually that is something that I'll do to, if I'm not feeling it, having like a blank page and not feeling like writing, right? Trying to fill this with stuff becomes like, it can sometimes be a huge mental block. But if we like hop ahead and now we've got, a similar blank page, but we just do like bullets of what do we want to happen in this scene, right? What are some things that we want to happen? What are some things we might want to foreshadow? What's going to have changed? Who are the characters that are there? What are they going to talk about? Even just like creating these little bullets and not necessarily looking at it as like I need to be just like writing an entire page and filling an entire page, but just what are some bullets? What are some things that I want to have happen, and what do I want to outline for like this next scene or for a different scene in the future? Because sometimes when you do that, now you are forced to think, okay, I need to get this point here, right? And when we do that, because we already know what's going to be happening here, we have that list again. And so now we know, oh, okay, this character needs to be in that scene. Well, okay, this character, I haven't even mentioned them yet. So maybe I introduce that character here, right? And maybe they're gonna be going or doing this thing, this plot point. Well, maybe I should foreshadow a little bit. So maybe we can add some like foreshadowing elements in that chapter or that scene or that page. That's just one thing that we can do. Another thing, if we're just sort of not feeling like writing or anything like that, another thing is you can just watch a movie, read a book, do something like that, and just take notes, right? Try to identify what are like the 5 elements of fiction that are being used. What are some what is it that, like, you know, I'm watching this movie, and like, what is the inciting event, right? What is the thing that like kicks off the plot? Are there any like archetypes, or are there any like tropes that this movie or this thing is using? Sometimes that too will help at least ignite some kind of spark to get past like this blockage point and keep going. Let's see. For me, the days I don't feel inspired, I do drafting. Yeah, that's true. Toggling between drafting and editing, that's also good too. You just don't want to run into the trap of, I wrote this scene and I feel like I'm stuck, so I go back and I re-edit, and I get to the same point again, and I'm like, okay, but I'm still kind of stuck. I'll go back and re-edit. You know what I mean? You don't want to do that. Usually I'll go back and do that re-edit thing if there's been like a day, if there's been a little bit of time, or even let's say like I was writing and I got to this point and I stopped and I come back and I get there and I'm like, where was I going with this? Or what was going to be like the next things? Then I'll go back and I'll edit up to that point, and usually then I'll be like, okay, I see where I was setting up, or I see where I was going with it. So that's another thing you can do too. Maybe leading question that you can pull in future videos. Oh, if you put up a question Discord channel for only a set time and then make it and then take it down. I wonder if you put up a question Discord channel for. Do you mean oh, are you saying do like a poll for future videos in the Discord channel? Is that what you're kind of saying? Yeah, that's true too. You can listen to songs that have a certain thematic presence or something. That's a good thing too. There's a lot of different things you can do to kind of like feel inspired. All right, let's do this. Let's do our at least in terms of the agenda. Let's do, this will be our third sprint. We'll do another one, but we'll probably keep going. I'm gonna start the timer, but I'm gonna go down and get something to drink really quick. So I'm just gonna turn off my little screen here. And then actually, here, why don't we do this? Let's take a 10-minute break. How about that? And then we'll all do the sprint together. Is that okay? We'll do a 10-minute break, or not 10 minute. We'll do a 5-minute break. We'll get something to drink. Come back. We'll do another sprint or another writing session, and then we'll probably do maybe do a few more, maybe one, maybe two more after that. Because we got a little bit late start today. Yeah, everybody needs a refill. And you get a little more coffee. Got tea. Let's do that. I'm going to throw up. All right, that doesn't have a mic on it. All right, okay. I'm gonna throw that up. We'll be right back. Be here in 5 minutes. Okay. Real recaffeinated. Just channels that last a certain amount of time so they don't have to drag on, definitely. Kind of a jump in now and lose your turn motivation. Oh, were you talking about the Discord? Yeah, that there's we'll figure out something to do with that, especially like what's the incentive. um Channel interaction is definitely something that we want, or will be like, like limited stuff might be a good incentive, but I want a lot of the incentive to be like interacting with other writers and maybe the value add between the different parties and stuff involved. So, but we'll consider all of these things. Okay, let's do. I think this is, yeah. I checked it off, but let's do our next writing session. We'll come back and then we'll see if anybody threw up any other questions or if there's anything else to talk about, and then we will probably do a couple more, maybe one or two more after that. So, all right, I'm gonna throw on my screen filter so y'all can't see what I'm actually writing. Okay. All right. Let's put up the timer and let's get to writing. All right, sorry about that. That was my car. How was everybody's writing session? It's kind of nice for me. I was able to. I'm like now at a point where there's like nothing I can really do to edit, and this is kind of like basically going to be like the main climax of probably the midway point. So kind of getting that tone is going to be tricky, and I'm definitely going to probably go and rework this a lot. But it's kind of exciting to be a little bit, well, I guess we'll say this is a little bit past the midway point. It's almost at exactly the halfway point for the chapters that I planned for. This is going to be like chapter 14 of 28 or so. But yeah. Let's see. My characters were just sitting in front of each other, ready for the first words. Yeah, nice. Yeah, finding like especially like writing romantic scenes, or even like I guess that kind of emotional scenes can sometimes be a tricky thing for like setting up. Because there's always like, you don't want things to be super cliche, and you don't want things to be like cheesy, but you also want them to be sweet. So yeah, that can be hard to set up and write. The one I'm writing right now is the complete opposite. So in terms of tone and stuff. So yeah, there's definitely different camps and stuff. But one thing I'm curious with everyone that's here, how many words kind of have you written in total? Or I think we've done now 3 writing sprints or sprinting sessions. Yeah, I think I've gotten about 800, but it's been a lot of just editing words, and then I did a little bit of actual writing. Probably for the next session is going to be mostly all new words, not really writing or editing or anything like that. So I'm curious how many all of you have kind of written. Nice. 866. That's pretty good. That's really good. I'm really struggling with the big betrayal scene in my manuscript, conveying the right emotions. Yeah, it's the getting like the tone or even the emotions right for a scene. Sometimes isn't even about like what's going on in the scene, but it's about what happened leading up to the scene. I know that's the case for uh, a lot of things, but I think what also might help with getting that tone correct is knowing where the like tension lies. Um, take like a romance scene, right? Is the tension in between the two characters, and that tension can be very different, right? It can be like the chemistry or even like the sexual tension between them, but it also could be the tension of like you don't want one character to get rejected. And so those can be 2 very different things. And the same thing goes for, if you're writing a betrayal scene, it's kind of, is the betrayal going to be a shock, or is the betrayal more so that the tension is in the characters betraying another being found out? And that's kind of the tricky part about figuring out, and usually what you can do to kind of set whatever tone that is. Where is that tension? where's like that uneasiness that the reader is going to kind of be feeling. A little bit of just researching, probably 300 words or less, maybe 250 words. I'm trying to turn notes into words. Yeah, that's good too. Yeah. And that's the thing is sometimes too, it's even trickier to take notes that you have and then convert those into actual words, just because when something's an idea or a note, it's this like little perfect snippet that if you never touch it, it will always remain like a perfect little snippet. But then the minute that you try to take that little perfect snippet and make it into an actual scene or incorporate into a scene, it can become it can like start to break itself and everything. So yeah, I know that sometimes that is even harder, and may not have the most, may not get you the most words, but it will definitely, um, definitely is like a good way of like testing out to see, is this thing really just a note or a good idea, or is it something else? Cats are big distractions. The best friend of a writer, but also the worst enemy at times. Let's see. But yeah, luckily I don't well, actually not luckily. I grew up with cats, but I don't have any with me now. So I don't have any that can distract or be company. The only company is chat right now. But let's do this. Let's do, because it seems like all of us were kind of in a good flow, in a good rhythm. Um let's keep it going. Let's do another sprint or another session. See where we are at, and then maybe we take this to 11 Eastern. We'll go for another hour. Whether that's at least one more sprint and then maybe another one, or if we do a if we do one of these sessions and then there's some good discussions going on, we'll take it up to 11. And if there's stuff going good from there, then we'll go a little bit further. But let's plan for another hour, and then we'll see where we're at. Old cat demands a lot of attention. Yes, that is also true. All right, I will flip on the timer. Um, yeah, if you guys want to share your favorite sentences, yeah, feel free to throw them down. Those would be kind of cool to read. Um, but let's get into this last, maybe last, uh, sprint. Right. Here's the timer. I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself. Um, happy writing. All right. Another writing session down. How did everybody do? Thanks for answering my question about editors an hour ago. Oh, yeah, he said your aunt called. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that's I think it was a good question. Yeah, it's a good question. Knowing when to edit, how much to edit, all that kind of stuff um is it's always kind of hard to assess on your own, I guess. Cooking dinner now, so in and out, yeah. Good. A little bit of a different time zone. One thing I was gonna ask too is how we feel as well. I like doing these in the morning. So I think that for those of us that are on um, either Eastern time zone or Central or whatever, getting up early and kind of getting a start to writing can sometimes be helpful. Um, I especially, I know I write better in the morning. Usually write better in the morning. Sometimes I can be like an evening writer as well. Um, but one thing I was going to ask is how we also feel about maybe sometimes doing evening writing sessions as well. My word count grows with my drafts, so I'm thinking a development editor now, while the word count is fairly low, is cheaper than 3 hours. That uh, it depends on how they're pricing it. Sometimes they price it based on um, project or amount of work. Um, Usually, if you've got a lower word count, um, that could work, but you're almost then having them read more of an outline, and so I don't know how much. I guess you'd have to talk because sometimes development editors they like to see the whole manuscript, and so that way they can give a little better feedback on kind of how things are going and everything. Um, but I would just shop around. I would see what they prefer if you find somebody you like or you want to work with. Um, I know for me, I'm uh I'm impartial. I'm kind of agnostic on the state of what a manuscript is in, kind of more so basing it off of um, what the writer or even the client kind of wants to get out of it, or what they're hoping to kind of um, what they're hoping to either improve on or fix or get feedback on. Um, Fewer distractions in the morning, also very true. Heard some critics say that not to have characters always looking at each other, but I love reading that when the scene needs it. Yeah, I would say too. It also kind of depends on your prose and how you deliver it. Um, it's one of those things too where it's like a critic might say that, or it might be a pet peeve of one, but it might be a favor of another, or sometimes you can write the exception to whatever pet peeve they might have. I'm a morning writer myself, so mornings work better for me. I crash and go to bed about 5:30 p.m. California time. That's That's early going to bed. But you're also, I think you're up. You were up at like 5 or 4 something this morning. So, yeah, I get to be the same way. I get to be the same way when it comes to writing in the morning or writing in the evening. But I was gonna do a little bit of a poll to see, at least it's funny too. I'm also polling the people that are here for the morning writing session, um, if they would do one or if they're also interested in one, uh, doing it in the evening. Um, let's say, I haven't done this before. I haven't done a poll before. We'll try it out. Um, been up since 2:30 a.m. That is impressive. Is that for work or is that just you just enjoy getting up that early? I used to work in the construction industry, and so those are usually pretty early starts. So I would usually get up around 4 to write for an hour or two before I had to go in to work. Um, I was on the project management side, but we still had to be there when the contractors were there. So if I'm not working, I'll be there. Oops, what just happened there? Let's see, is the oops. Doing all kinds of things, my bad. How is the poll is at 67% no. Interesting. Here we'll end it. What did it look like? 33% yes, 66% no. Nice. Well, we might try it because I want to try a couple of things because I gotta do a couple of things. I want to see if I can get either. I want to see if I can get some audio things to work. But I also I want to so I might do some testing screens. Also too, if I'm writing then I might just start a stream, see if other people join in as well. Let's see. I'm strictly a writer. Do my best writing early because I live in an apartment complex that is a little noise. Yeah, that's a good point too. Um, yeah, I usually whenever I record videos because it's right now it's a perfect day for the camera and everything. I don't have any blinds, so when the sun is up, certain times of the year, it just gets blasted out, um, lighting wise and exposure. So I usually try to do anything that I need to do in front of the camera or anything where I'm going to be sitting here for a while. I usually try to do that on the early side in the morning, personally. 5:30 p.m. So this is already an evening stream for you. I got a question for all of you. What is everybody reading right now? I don't think we've asked that before. Or what is the most recent thing you read? Recently, I just finished Mistborn. by Brandon Sanderson. It's funny. It's Brandon Sanderson is one of those people that I've seen his lectures and stuff, and I know of him. I've known of him for a very long time. But I had not ever read him until this year. Despite how famous and despite all the recommendations, he was always just kind of like on the back burner of my TBR list. James Herbert's Shrine, an audiobook, The Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, Handmaid's Tale is very good. I don't remember the last time I read that. That was a while back. Let's see. Starter Villain by John Scalzi. I think you had mentioned that last stream. And I was saying that I haven't read John Scalzi since I read Old Man's War, or at least not just the first one, but some of the other ones too. I think I stopped at the third or fourth book or something. Just finished Gilgamesh the Immortal. I don't think I've read that, but I know of the epic. Or is that the same thing? Because if that's the same thing, then I might have read or listened to that before. But yeah, Brandon Sanderson. It's interesting. I might do a little bit of a video on that just because he's so well known, and he has a he has his own, I think it's a publishing company, Dragonsteel Productions, but it might also just be like a media company or something. I'm not sure what it is, but he, through that, he's got his own, they have a podcast, and he's got a YouTube channel, and he does these lectures and stuff. And so he gives a lot of advice, and it was interesting to only be familiar with sort of his teachings or the things that he teaches, and then going back and reading one of his books and seeing kind of how he implemented some of those things. So that was really interesting to kind of read. Old stories are sometimes hard to digest, and audiobooks sometimes make it easy to read old stories. I 100% agree. That was the case for a lot of like what quote unquote like classic science fiction as well, I would say. Because I think too, there's depending on like what era you're in or what era you started reading in, sometimes it can be really hard to re-enter some of those old, or not even old, it was a different time period over the course of history, different time period for the way things were written and the way things sound and stuff. Sometimes it can be very, very hard to read or to pick up on that. I mean, I think Cloud Atlas is a pretty modern book, but one of the viewpoint chapters, or I guess characters, is from like, I don't remember. It has to be like the 1700s, 1800s, something like that. And it's written very accurate to the way that they speak and the way the letters were written, stuff like that. And I remember those chapters in particular just taking forever trying to read, just because I had to like change my brain on how I was reading some of the way the sentences flowed and structured and stuff. But yeah, I felt that way when it comes to a lot of classic science fiction as well. Just the way that some things were written in the style they were written in. I found that the audiobook was helpful to just kind of hear it a little bit better than it was trying to sit there and read it. Beta reading. Yeah, I wish I could count all the stuff that I read for work and whatnot. I wish I could Wish I could count that stuff for how many books or whatever that I read a year, because as I started doing this kind of stuff full time, I thought I'd have, more time to write, more time to read, but uh, you're doing all that stuff for work. So the amount of books I read in a year has not changed very much. Uh, who writes the best descriptions? To me, Patrick Rothfuss. Patrick Rothfuss writes very good descriptions. I think what he does really well too is he writes very good. He's very poetic with some of his writing, and he's very good at um he's very good at like association, right? um I really enjoy Patrick Rothfuss's writing. I think I read both of his books a couple of times, and I guess the little short stories he's done too. He's done the Slow Regard of Silent Things, and I think there might be another one. We also did a spinoff of a children's book, but I don't think I've read that. But definitely both of the books in the Kingkiller Chronicles. I love Hawthorne, but it takes so long for me to get into that rhythm. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Even a book too that it's funny. I always warn people, especially with Dune when Dune came out. Um, a lot of people got into, or they wanted to go read the books and stuff like that. Um, and I would kind of warn people that I was like, listen, this was written in a different era, especially with the point of view that it uses, because it uses third person omniscient, and I'm like, and it's a very, comparing it to modern ways, it's very hard to to read that without it being distracting. um so Dune is one of those two that I was like, you can try reading it, but if you're struggling, then just like do the audiobook, because um the story is still really good, but it's just the writing styles can sometimes be very hard to follow. um Read a friend's book, and I feel like it had real promise, but someone said mean things and she gave up on it after completing the first draft. Yeah, I mean that's too bad. I like, the thing is that you're never going to make everybody happy with your story, and you're never going to please everybody. And the minute that you try to please everybody, you're going to please nobody. Or you're not going to please yourself. It's not going to be something that you want. Um, so I would try to tell your friend to continue, despite whatever things people say. Wise Man's Fear was good. Yep, from Patrick Rothfuss. Yeah. Also, too. I mean, and this is something that I'm actually working on a video about as well. Is that like not all advice and feedback is created equal. Um, you have no idea, like, especially if you're sharing it with people that. Well, there's two things: sharing with people that know you personally, and sharing with people that don't know you personally. The thing about sharing it with people that you don't know personally is that you have no idea what their biases are, and what their personal preferences are, and you have no idea kind of where they're coming from with whatever their feedback is that they're giving. Sometimes also too, they're not really aware of it either. And judging a piece of work within the vacuum of that piece of work can be a hard thing to do. I mean, even me, I have my own preferences and tendencies. So even when I'm editing other people's work, or reading something, I know that I have my own um my things that I like and the things that I don't like, and sometimes it's hard to do, but you have to try to shed those, or at least be aware of them, and be transparent about that. The other thing about feedback when it comes to people that you do know personally is that uh, most times people they just want to be supportive, and so if you only ever share or get feedback from your friends and family, and it's all glowing, that might be a sign that whatever the feedback is that you're getting isn't 100% honest. It's just it's hard to it's hard to find like meaningful and constructive critique, because in one sense people don't want to offend or crush your dreams or hurt whatever feelings you might have. um the other thing is that sometimes we don't know, or people that don't work or operate in a writing world or writing circle don't really know how to like critique effectively or constructively. um yeah, so it can be tricky trying to get feedback and trying to get like constructive and helpful criticism and critique. The problem is fact based and emotion based. The former sees all the mistakes, the latter sees the premise. I can be both. Yeah, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's also looking at things holistically, the combination of the two things. Um, I mean, even if you're looking at things from like a totally grammatical lens, they might be incorrect grammatically, but there might be a reason for that for the story or something. Same thing with like the fact based of like an effective story structure. Um, you know, I preach it, not necessarily preach it, but like suggest it that you should have some kind of structure in place. You should have this and that. Um, but for whatever reason, sometimes it's just it works for the story that it isn't that way. So it can be a hard thing to judge, and that's why taking a lot of different perspectives and opinions and feedback from people is useful. Getting all of your feedback and critique or criticism from one source is something that even if people seek me out, I tell people get second opinions as well. Um, if it is a story you love and it is a message you want to scream to the world, the best way to take criticism is to evaluate and then edit based on what one thinks is relevant and helpful. Yeah, I also am in a firm believer, and again, I know that this is something that is like a bias of my own, or a this is something that I could just be a me thing, right? And I recognize that some people are hard. It's hard to do, but I really separate my. I really do separate how I feel and how much I care about a project than like from the project, and so I try not to like wed myself to any ideas or any characters or concepts or whatever. Um, for me, that makes it easier to evaluate criticism, because if somebody's pushing back on something that I really want to be in there, I have to take a step back and think why I really want it to be in there. What is it that makes me really want to have that in there? And then also too, you can look at it from the light of, well, why is this person saying I should remove it? Maybe they hate whatever trope it is, or maybe they didn't like whatever character it is. Or maybe they have a really good reason for it or something. Maybe it breaks immersion or something. Um, at least for me, I really try to separate myself and my emotion, not my emotional, because emotional attachment is a valid reason to have something in there, and emotional interpretation and the use and how we feel about something is a totally valid thing to have. But I try to separate that feeling towards a body of work and view it as just a body of work rather than something that's like mine or a part of me or something. I try not to lean into that sort of romanticization of the art, right? And cut it out. Wasn't able to make it this time. I just woke up. Ooh, just in time for us to hop off. Not this second though. Let's see. When I beta read, I am honest and constructive. I try not to say what is or isn't working, but why. Yeah, that's good too. That's usually pretty helpful. Yeah, being vague when it comes to saying I like this, I don't like that. Usually isn't that helpful. Usually it's about wanting to know why. But if you're find yourself repeating the same thing over and over, then sometimes you can just say, as I've said before, or something. All right. Any other questions? How was this? I know we started a little bit later. Some of us probably didn't matter because you've been up for a couple hours already. For others, how was this writing session or these sprints and stuff? Like I said, I think I said this last week. I want to try to get another into the schedule, another one of these kind of live streams, but I'm not quite sure when I want to do it. I kind of want to keep a morning one and then maybe try to fit in an afternoon or even an evening one. So we'll see. Good. People, yeah. Just getting me on the computer to write is good. I agree. Well, I was just barely able to join this one. It's 6:30 in the morning for me. I think what we'll try to do is we'll try to make a later or we'll try to find a day in the week where we can do maybe like an afternoon or an evening one. Because we're all over the world, it's hard to pinpoint a time and place that works for everybody. So hopefully doing one on both ends will be helpful. I'm glad this was motivating. All right. Well, let's cut it there. Next time I think we're going to talk also about, or maybe before next time, I might try to get a Discord set up so we can maybe get a little bit better look at what times work for people and stuff like that. Pretty nice to me. Unfortunately, I work in the morning, so I usually just have to. Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is that so? I think what we'll try to do is we'll keep one morning one, and then I'll try to fit in something for an afternoon or an evening. So that way we can try to get, if people can't come in mornings, they can listen for one and then join the other and stuff like that. Autocorrect as well. Autocorrect is very important. Okay. Let's cut it there then. Don't know when my next video is going to come out. I've been working on a couple of different scripts and I haven't had a chance to record any of them. But maybe something next week or maybe Sunday. I'm trying to get a good rhythm, but I kind of I fell a little bit behind on some of my scripting and then my recording and stuff like that. So something will come up soon. Last video about heroes, protagonists, main characters. Yeah, thank you. A couple of the videos have done really, really which is very cool to see. I'm just glad that it's helpful to people and whatnot. The next one though, I'm going between a couple of different topics. One of them is because again, I know that and we'll see how well this lands, because again, we talked a little bit about it earlier, but like the meta of, you know, creating a video and the meta of stuff on YouTube usually taps into some kind of emotional response to have people click or see stuff. But I'm trying to make a more positive one that has to do with world building. There was I did that one on the mistakes that are made on world building, so I'm trying to do a little bit of the inverse of like, if you're doing these things, keep doing them. Here's some good things to do when it comes to world building. So I'm working on that. I'm working on a couple of other ones as well, but we'll see. Maybe too, when we have the Discord set up, we can do we can talk more about topics, because I just found that putting it on the community tab in YouTube just isn't the best. It's good for some things, but spamming it on there, I feel like it can be very, very overdone. I think we found a pretty good balance between talking about videos and topics and stuff, and also talking about other writing related things, whether they're polls, questions, stuff like that. So okay, everybody enjoy the rest of your day, whether it's evening or morning or afternoon. We'll hop on again soon. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.